Noon, depending on where you are. This is Zach Parnell, I'm the Vice President of Operations here at ITI. I just want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're pretty excited. We got industry expert, longtime industry player here, Joe Collins, to guest speak on how to manage crane accidents. Joe's with Becht Engineering, and he's going to, I've seen the presentation. Mike has seen it live. I've gone through the presentation. Just awesome. So welcome. There's quite a few people, logging in right now, but we're just going to get started. And I'll go over housekeeping items here in a second, how to put in questions, how to use a chat bar and whatnot. But let's dive into what you can expect today and about ITI a little bit, what this whole webinar series is about. So if you're not familiar with us, in this webinar series, we do this once a month, but it's really because we are an education company. That's what we do. ITI, we have companies in Canada, the U.S., and Brazil, and we work quite extensively in Asia Pacific as well, but mostly operate in the Western Hemisphere. So what's neat is we do have quite a few customers online today from various industries and a lot of folks that we haven't worked with yet. So if you're checking us out or want to learn more about our curriculum and whatnot, feel free to do so or contact us afterwards. But as you can see, we really cover every industry that conducts lifting activities. So there's several folks online from KBR, and I'm just looking at some of the customers on here, BP and Siemens we saw, and Kiewit, Rio Tinto, BHP Billiton. So welcome everybody. The webinar series, if you're not familiar, again, we have several recordings on there, everybody. Like on the website, there's an immense amount of information. So all these webinars here on the left, there are the recordings of them and also the PowerPoint presentation available. So if you want to outfit your rigging binder and your education binder, well, just feel free to go on there, download them all. Just information does nothing but improve the industry and by improving our minds, and our knowledge. So we don't have any of the future ones up today, but we do. Next month we'll be having a discussion on equipment and asset management, RFID, and stuff like that. Very cool. We also, I want to point out, we do webinar training courses. I mean, most of our training is at client facilities and our training centers around North America. But we also have started doing webinar training courses. Next week, actually, we have about half capacity full already for the rigging gear inspection for supervisors. So if any of you would like to join that, just go to ITI webinars, iti.com/webinars after this. One thing I'd like to chat quickly about before I introduce Joe, a lot of you that have never experienced a course from us or anything might be interested in attending a workshop. So we have ITI workshops. They're regional, basically regionally specific events. We're doing one in Edmonton in June, Fort McMurray in September, and New York in November. They're not only regional, they're also industry specific. That we're going to really get after industry specific lifting activities. And we have several guest speakers at all of them. For instance, the one in Edmonton, we have Skip Oman from Crosby attending, and Michael Brunette from Manitowoc. I know there's a Manitowoc gentleman on the phone here today. Ken Reynolds from Shell, Jeff Holden from Leah, and Steve Fryer from Northern Crane. So these are really, really good purposes for high impact industry knowledge and help out in a specific region. So I'll turn it over to Joe quickly, and also Mike Parnell's on the phone. He's the president of our company, and his background is heavy into wire rope and rigging, and he's going to be able to handle and work with a Q&A session and also bounce some ideas back and forth with Joe. One thing I'd like to point out, he's the vice chairman of ASME B30 and the chairman of ASME P30, which is a new committee that should be releasing the standard this year on lift planning. So, whoops, one more, Joe. Again, I mentioned we have Joe Collins on the phone. I'm going to turn it over to him in 1 minute, but he's got 40 years in the industry. He's with Zachary for a long time, and he's been on CCO board of directors as well as the CDAC committee, which recently, I think Joe re-met, a lot of folks and constituents met in DC a month or two ago, but he's going to go over how to manage a crane accident. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he'll give you some background as well on Becht Engineering, what he does, but just be ready for a great presentation. So Joe, you should have the screen now, so take it away.
Okay. Bear with me 1 second here. I want to start off by thanking everyone for taking your time out to join us today. I hope that this presentation is useful and you take some information away that may be helpful to you in your daily work, although hopefully we don't have crane accidents on a daily basis. A little bit about Becht Engineering. I would encourage you to visit our website at becht.com, B-E-C-H-T. I'm assuming that the home page is showing on the screen currently.
Yep, we can do it, Joe.
If we did our technical things correctly. Just briefly, Becht Engineering is a service-oriented engineering consulting firm that is focused on providing technically excellent engineering services and innovative, sustainable solutions for clients worldwide. We are the go-to firm that clients approach when a job needs to be done right the first time. And if you do get an opportunity to visit the website, if you highlight the window up here, the tab for services, you can go down here and you can read more about the heavy lift services that we provide. I'm the manager of our heavy lift division. It's taking a minute to load up, but there's some photographs down here that you can look at, as well as a brief overview. Primarily, the primary service that Becht Heavy Lift offers is an independent third-party cold-eyes review of a lift contractor's lift plans. We maintain a engineering staff of registered PEs. They review the plans for compliance and accuracy and maximum safety. To add to that, we have field advisors with 30+ years of experience that go out and assure that the plans are followed and the state, federal, and the customers' safety policies are complied with. In addition to that, we provide crane policy consulting services. Since the new OSHA rule came out, there's a lot of people that are still trying to catch up, and we've been fortunate to work with some of the major refiners in updating their crane policies. We do provide crane coordinator services during turnarounds, which is one of Becht's high points. We do a lot of turnaround work, and then also we provide expert witness services when needed. To get back over here to our presentation, and so much for the advertising, but
and like I mentioned, Joe, to launch the meeting, Joe and I thought it'd be good to launch a poll question, everybody, to get you involved and help Joe understand what the audience experience has been like. So I'm going to launch this poll question while Joe gets ready here. So everyone, you'll see it coming up on your, you'll see it come up on your screen. How many crane accidents have you experienced in your career? And the really experience doesn't mean that you caused it or you were directly involved. It means that you were on site or it happened in your organization, but you were, it couldn't have happened. It's not like it happened in Atlanta when you were in Anchorage at the same company. You know, that's not really what we're looking for. We're trying to get an idea of, just think of 1 or 2 or 3 degrees away and had some involvement. And Joe, I had a couple comments while they're answering this. We have about 40% people voted so far. Can you speak a little bit closer to the mic? They're having a little trouble hearing you. But it looks like we have about 2/3 of the people voted, so I'm going to leave it open for another 5 seconds, everybody, then we'll get Joe off with the presentation, but results are coming in good. So,
Okay.
all right.
Is the sound a little better now?
It sounds great to me. I'm not sure, everybody, if you're having trouble or hearing Joe, you might need to turn up your speaker, but I'm on the same speaker as everybody else, and it sounds good to me. So that sounds good, Joe. I'm going to close the results, and I'm going to share them. It looks like, Joe, if you can't see this, 30% of the folks have not experienced an accident. About 32% have experienced one or two. And from there, 22% experienced 3 to 5, 9% experienced 6 to 9, and only 8% of the folks experienced 10 plus. Okay? So I'm going to turn off the results now, and that gives you an idea of the attendees' experience. And we can see your screen now, and you can take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. To answer the first poll question, in my 40 years of experience, I have been involved with either the cleanup or the investigation of 30 plus crane accidents. And to be totally honest, I lost count. As far as the ones that I actually witnessed, only in 2 occasions I was on a project and I actually saw a crane go over. Out of all those, otherwise I was always called in after the fact and try to figure out, what happened, what went wrong, and that sort of thing. In very many of those cases, I was actually one of the first responders because I was nearby, and I hope that answer is acceptable. Just starting out, no one plans to have a crane accident. We don't budget for this. The cost can be astronomical. When you start adding everything in together, you have the cost of the crane itself, or cranes if it's more than one, then damage to nearby structures or equipment. And then the big one that a lot of people don't consider is lost time to schedules, many hard dollar jobs, and also cost plus even in turnarounds. That cost can be unbelievably high. Not to mention injuries are unfortunate, but also quite expensive if you've ever been on that side of the coin. And of course, the one that we hate worst of all is if there is a fatality. And not only there's a loss of a person, but there's also an economical impact as a result of that. All these things are not budgeted for, which is all the more reason to, number one, have a good accident prevention plan and good work practices, but also be prepared in the event that one does occur, that you don't increase that cost by making some mistakes. We suggest that even though you don't plan to have an accident, no one does, we need to be prepared for one in the event that it does occur. In this presentation, we're going to hit on some high points. We've only got a few minutes, so this is going to be very general in nature, but I hope what you would take away from it is a thought process or a way of thinking that you could go on after this presentation and go ahead and develop and work out some solutions or some way of managing. Okay, am I still here, everybody? All right.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback, Joe. I don't know if it's on your desk or if somebody, we're getting some feedback a little bit. You got to be really careful not to make any noise, I think, around the keyboard, but should be good to go.
Okay, I made a little adjustment there. I don't know if that's worse or better.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, we'll go with that. Let me know if it gets fouled up. We'll adjust a little bit more. But anyway, I got stuck there a little bit. In the presentation, we're going to review some rescue tips and hazards, how to recognize the hazards, how to conduct an investigation in a very general sense. We're going to discuss removing the damaged crane from the site. One of my strong points here that I'm always on the soapbox talking about trying to manage the stored energy that occurs when things are bent and broken. We're going to discuss in general basic uprighting of the crane and then some crane rescue concepts. Imagine, if you can, you're at 5:15 in the afternoon, you're getting ready to go home for the day. We're working on a powerhouse job. We're already thinking about what we're going to do after work. We got to get mama a birthday present or a Valentine's gift or whatever it happens to be, but we're getting done. We're folding up our books. And the radio call comes in that the base section on the 2250 is buckled, and they want to know what to do. This is going to be a very challenging situation. In this specific case, the best thing you can do is evacuate the area. There's literally no way to save this because it's just a matter of seconds until she'll come on down. There are some situations where you might save the crane, but that's something that shouldn't be attempted by inexperienced persons. But this is what we're going to talk about. We've got a scene that looks like this. What is the course of action? What all do I need to do? What do I have to have in my plan to go forward and not make the situation worse safety-wise or financially? This would be another situation where there's a crane turned over on a live expressway, okay? The tip of the boom is sticking out into live traffic on the freeway. Very serious situation. It has to be managed. You're going to need all kinds of things to happen, and they need to happen real quick. And without a good plan, things can go worse in a matter of seconds. So I think that the first order of business would be assess the immediate dangers. As soon as you're notified and you can get there, the first responder, are there any serious injuries, minor injuries? Is anyone trapped? If that is the case, you want to notify fire and rescue immediately. I suggest you have those numbers either in your pocket or posted by the phone so that you can get those calls, because as we all know, sometimes a matter of seconds or minutes can mean a life or death. When those fire and rescue people show up, it'll take them a few minutes to get there. This gives you an opportunity to assess if something's hanging loose, if it looks like it's going to fall some more. We don't want to let the fire and rescue people walk into a trap and become victims as well. It's our responsibility to inform them, you know, that they know how to do the rescues, but we need to let them know that this is hanging, this is loose, this may come down on you. So it's not exactly like a car wreck, you know. There's a lot of things that have to be considered. That brings us to the second bullet. Are the crane and affected structures secure? Again, we want to assess the danger. We can do that just visually before those people arrive and explain the situation to them of your observations and let them see it. Ultimately, they're going to do what they want to do, but at least you have informed them to the best of your ability. I can assure you that such as this accident that we all read about in New York City, if there's a fatality or multiple fatalities, the rescue teams will dominate your site. And you're not going to have anything to say about it. They're going to take control. They're going to be in charge until they get all the injured or fatalities removed from the situation. And in a lot of cases, such as in the city, they will remain there and stay in charge. So your role at that point would be to support them with assist equipment and expertise on rigging, which they may or may not have. Again, we're going to assess the immediate dangers. Are there hazards to the public or other job personnel? Immediately, we need to barricade the area in a big perimeter to prevent entry by any non-essential persons. This also serves to preserve the site for a later investigation. And here's the big one. If it's in the city or if it's not on private property in a fenced-in area, you know, the news folks are going to show up, the CNN people if it's a big one, or Fox News. Who will give them a statement? I wanted to caution you that you know, well, most companies have a public relations person, but if it's you and you don't have someone in that position, I encourage you, when you're doing interviews with the press, only give facts. Do not speculate as to the cause, as whatever you say will be on at 10 o'clock or 5 o'clock or all day long, depending on how serious it was. But be very careful what you tell them, but only give facts. Speculation can come back to haunt you in a litigation side of things if it happens to go there, and often does. You need to initiate an investigation once the injured are cared for, if there was, or you know, the scene or the site is now stabilized. It's barricaded. Any folks that need to be removed are removed. Now we need to start an investigation. I've seen numerous cases in my career where the operator was fired before the dust settled. Unfortunately, that's the first person we need to talk to. So we want to get statements from everyone, all the witnesses, as soon as possible. And then I would encourage you, as these investigations do take a fair amount of time, take the initial statements and then come back a day or two or several days later and interview them again. And the reason I say that is these things can tend to be very traumatic. And all they saw during the first interview may be, well, I saw the boom coming down and the dust went everywhere and stuff was flying and I was running. But after a day or two, they begin to calm down and their memory starts to come back. And we've seen this very often, that they're able to add to their comments a little later on. Something that I'm guilty of is leading the witness. You know, some things are just painfully obvious. You can see clearly at a glance what happened, but you need to let them tell their story. I'm very guilty of saying, well, you know, the crane turned over. Were you out of chart? Were you doing this? Were you doing that? I can see short outriggers. You know, don't go there. Let them tell their story. Because once you start putting words in their mouth, they're just going to let you tell the story, and you won't have good statements. Continuing the investigation, now it's time, we've done our interviews, now it's time to examine the site and the crane. To back up a little bit, there are going to be some cases, for example, when the crane boom was out in the highway, that has to be moved immediately. But there's other cases where this equipment and damaged product does not have to be moved, and if it does not have to be moved, we want to leave it there so that we can take pictures Careful measurements. We need to record everything we see, even if it's insignificant. One of the things I've noticed looking at investigations where I didn't visit the site, they sent me a bunch of pictures. I see a picture of a hole in the ground where the headache ball landed. Well, that doesn't help me at all. That doesn't assist the folks that are trying to figure out. We need to get back and take pictures in a broad sense, if you will, so that you can see the outriggers, you can see the position of the boom. You know, cable rolled up in a pile, that is not much value in that. So be thoughtful in your picture taking part. Again, you want to note everything you see. Keep a notebook with you, and as you take a picture, you might want to make a note of what it is you're taking a picture of. You want to have tape measures, square, angle indicators. You want to check the boom angle. If it's a hydraulic telescoping crane, that can tell you a lot. If it's a crawler crane, if you actually measure the length of the boom hoist rope that is extended, you can use that to determine a boom angle and also a radius based on the boom length and so forth. Outrigger extensions, note the matting, if there was soft ground, if the load was attached and the final position of the load, that tells us a lot. The condition of the ground, so on, so on, so on. But it's more information you can gather, the better. Be very thoughtful in that process. Something that we have nowadays that we did not have years ago, most of the cranes today are equipped with data loggers in the computer system. They're a wonderful help. Those data loggers, I can remember one situation where a crane turned over. We were able to download the data logger, and I could see second by second the weight on the hook, the boom angle as it was decreasing, and finally went off the page. You could literally look at this printout and see the crane turning over. It was very interesting. This is extremely valuable. If you're not an experienced technician, get a hold of your distributor or the factory manufacturer and get their advice as to who can help you download that data logger. There's a lot of very valuable information there. On most trains today, the last configuration will be present when the key is turned on. This is a helpful item for crane operators. You know, they go to lunch, they come back within 30 minutes, they turn on the key, and it brings them right back to everything is set as it was before lunch, and they can just hit OK, nothing changed. So that would be helpful to you to be prepared. Don't turn that key on until you have your technician in place. As a matter of fact, it would be a good idea to have the distributor, the dealer technician, or the factory technician there before you attempt to turn the key on, because a lot of times the computer will reset itself, and there again, then valuable information is lost. This is just I don't even know why I put this picture in here. It doesn't really say anything, but it just it gives you an idea of what a display may look like. You've got the programming key there. If you look at the information on here, only a technician would understand what the configuration was, the error code, and so forth. We won't dwell on that. To complete the investigation, some crane accidents are minor in nature and are easy to figure out. The outrigger sank into the ground, he turned over, or the choker broke and he turned over backwards. I mean, some things are very easy to understand. Other situations can be extremely complex and will require weeks or even months of forensic study to determine the root cause. And I've been on a few of those, and they're real hair pullers, I'll tell you. You're trying to figure it out, you're checking limit switches, a lot of things can be involved. It may take a lot of time. There will be some cases that will never be totally solved, but using all the information that was gathered, you can narrow it down to a few possible causes in order to determine a prevention plan. As with anything, once something happens, we don't want it to happen again, so we want to learn from our mistakes. So that would be the value. Even if you can't solve it, you can at least get a pretty good idea what went wrong. Moving on, I'm going kind of fast because we got a lot of material and I want to have some time for questions, but removing the crane from the site. This is the most complicated and hazardous part. And highlighted in red, there is no instruction manual for this. I've called the distributor, I've called the factory, and they said, we can send you somebody, but it's not in a book. It's just not, we don't write those things down. They might nowadays, but I haven't found one yet. If you don't have the distributor or your manufacturer representative there, it is advisable to consult a registered professional engineer who is experienced in cranes and rigging. The engineer can calculate the center of gravity for the crane uprighting and design complex, unique rigging applications required for handling bent and broken components. I have actually been on a couple of jobs. I'll show some pictures a little later of one where we had to design a four-way bridle with 4 different link slings to pick this piece of boom. We'll talk about that when we get to the picture. Another thing, if it's not in the public's way or if it's possible to leave things alone, contract your insurance carrier before attempting to move anything. They like to come out and take pictures and measurements themselves, and oftentimes if it's a very expensive loss for them, they will bring their own expert in to evaluate and do an investigation, sometimes simultaneously with yours, sometimes independently. Be sure you get your insurance guy on the horn and get him over there as soon as possible. Stored energy. I'm on my soapbox all the time about this. So many times I've heard these horror stories where a crane went over, everybody walked away, nobody's hurt, and then we get a mechanic out there with a cutting torch, and the next thing you know, a piece of boom sprung up and hit him in the head and killed him, and that's just not acceptable. Anytime there's stored energy in crane as they're working, there's also stored energy present when a boom is damaged or twisted or hanging from something. This energy has to be released in a controlled manner. Never use a cutting torch unless there's no other way. And if the torch is necessary, I've actually put one on the end of a scaffold pole so I could stand 10 feet away and just melt it in two. Because it will get on you and it will hurt you. Again, many workers have been seriously injured or killed disassembling bent booms and jibs. We want to restrain all boom, jib, and crane components before disconnecting. Then release the energy a little bit at a time until it is completely relaxed. Don't cut stuff loose and let it flop, because it could flop your direction. It may look like it's going to flop the other way, but it could flop towards you, and then you're caught between, which is not good. I recommend a couple of different methods for controlling and releasing that stored energy gradually. One is an old-fashioned mechanical pin puller, and I beg your pardon for the artwork, but if you can see here, this 3 boxes basically represent the male and female boom connections, and the red lines here represents a boom pin. All right, to get inside and try to drive that out would be extremely hazardous. To cut it with a torch is even worse. But you can, a lot of times, get in here and weld a nut to the end of the pin, install an all-thread rod, okay? The green line represents a piece of pipe that's a larger diameter than the head of the pin. The pale blue represents a steel plate, and this section here is a center pull porta-piler with another nut. What you can do by installing this, you just have to make one weld and put all this together. Then you can get a 30 or 40 foot hose for your ram, and you can literally pull that pin from a distance. So if it does flop, it's not going to flop on top of you or of your co-workers. Okay, I highly recommend the pin puller. It takes time to weld all these nuts on here. I've had very good success with a 3/4 inch diameter all threaded rod and a nut. You know, if they can get a little bit of weld on it, usually those pins will come out pretty easy. They tend to pull easier than they push. Another method of controlling that energy is to use come-alongs and cross-chain diagonally. We'll show a sketch or an illustration of that in the next slide. But basically, by cross-chaining that from both sides of the boom, then using your pin puller, you can actually pull those boom pins out, and this thing won't move if it's done properly. Okay, and then you can go up and approach it and gradually let off. One of the chain falls, okay, nothing happens. You tighten it back up. You can slack off on the other one. Now it begins to move. You can see which way it's going to move. Then you can gradually release that energy by slacking off the chain fall without letting it just fly up in the air. The dark bold lines represent how you would attach your chain falls, and you do that on opposite sides of the boom. This is just a suggestion. And then you could release these two and see if it wants to go down. You can release the other two and see if it wants to go up. That energy is trying to get out. We don't know where that energy is, but by restraining it and then having adjustable come-alongs or some adjustable device, we can gradually release that energy once we know where it is and how it wants to dissipate itself. It wants to relax. So we just need to do that on our terms and not just let it go crazy. Uprighting the crane, I've heard, again, I'm sure we all have, so many horror stories where a simple crane tips over. Nothing, no big deal. Everybody walks away. We bring another crane in, and the first thing you know, we've turned it over on top of the one that's already turned over. This happens all too often. And the key to uprighting the crane is to understand the center of gravity in the crane. Understand where it is and allow for that. As you start to upright the crane, the center of gravity is forward, okay? In most, let's say the crane turned over to the front. The center of gravity is going to be forward of top dead center. As you raise that up, when that CG passes top dead center, now it's going to want to fall the other way. So we need to have a backup crane or some kind of a holdback system not to allow it to fall the rest of the way over. I've actually heard a story where they were uprighting one and it passed center and it rocked back so hard it turned over the other way. And that would be embarrassing, certainly, if not extremely dangerous. But we want to use a holdback device, and if you use two cranes, or a crane and a tow truck, or whatever method you decide on, it's a very good practice to oversize those significantly, like 2 or 3 to 1. And the reason for that is there's no instruction book, and we can do our best estimates on where that CG is and what each crane will be holding. But what we want to oversize the cranes to allow for any kind of a shock load. Let's say it does flop a little bit. If it flops hard and you're near capacity, it'll pull the boom out of your assist crane. So we want a big enough crane so if it flops over a little bit unexpectedly, it's not going to tear up our equipment. I always oversize them as high as possible that's within reason. Another mistake that I see a lot of times is they'll tie the whole back crane or the lifting crane to something that is either damaged or not securely attached. For example, the counterweight on this crane has two very small pins to hold it on. They're more than sufficient to hold the counterweight on under normal operation, but it's not intended to rig on and hold half the weight of the crane, okay? So you want to be sure whatever you rig onto is not going to come loose, it's not going to be pulled off, such as this one. If you hooked onto this counterweight, either the lugs would probably break or the counterweight would come disconnected from the crane, and then we've got another problem. Simple physics here. You're going to be lifting with one crane, lowering with the other one. Again, in this case, both cranes are oversized for the anticipated load. I get questioned by people, why do you have such big cranes here? Because I don't want any more broken things. We've already got enough damage. But as you lift, that center of gravity is going to start moving towards top dead center. So the tailing crane, I call it, will literally have no load. This will be a no load in this position. This one will have a full load. Moving forward, around in this area, this center of gravity right here is going to be passing what I'm calling top dead center. So this tailing crane is going to gradually take some load. This operation needs to be done extremely slowly. There's no hurry. We're going to take our time. We're going to just gradually move things just an inch at a time till we see what it's going to do, okay? But at this point, the tailing crane is taking load, and here shortly, the lifting crane will be released of load, okay? As it comes on down, of course, now you can't see the initial lifting crane, but at this point, the tailing crane has successfully lowered this gently back onto its outriggers. I want to point out, if you can see here in the corner, that outrigger is bent. The one on the back side, on the same side of the crane, is also bent. So a little forethought going into this, once we get it back upright, now we still have to do something with it. We need to load it on a truck and take it to the shop, okay? It's hard to see in the shadows, but we had enough foresight. While it was tipped up, we put some cribbing underneath this tire. We put some cribbing under the back tire on the tip side, so that when it came down and it came back on its feet again, we were able to lower these outrigger cylinders. Oops, sorry about that. We were able to retract these cylinders on this side, allowing these cylinders to be in the air just a few inches, so we could actually pull the beam out. Because it's not going to scope in, and we can't drive it like that. So those kind of things are important to think about before you roll it over. Otherwise, you're going to have to rig it again to lift it up to get those beams out. Just a note there. Crane rescues have been accomplished successfully many, many times. The picture on the left is a crane that was working in a luffing jib configuration. The operator error, he boomed it up in bypass until he damaged the boom base section severely. None of us on the site felt it was safe to boom it down because the lacings were actually disconnected. where that basket is, and many of them were bent, and the main cords were also bent. But this wasn't as bad as that first picture we saw, where it was really buckled. With advice from the manufacturer, we attempted a rescue. We were able to weld some support beams in place where those lacings were bent and disconnected. And with the manufacturer's approval, we were able to boom this crane down and save the crane, save the boom. It can be done, but I really want to make the point that this should never ever be attempted unless you have experience, or the distributor or the manufacturer or a professional engineer, or all of them there to assist. You can get in really big trouble doing this. It can be extremely hazardous. I would encourage you, do not attempt to attach an assist crane to it, because again, if the whole thing buckles, it could buckle while your folks are up there attaching it. As soon as you tighten up on the assist crane, that could be just enough to cause that that buckling of the base section, assuming that's what it is. Don't attempt to attach an assist crane to it. Evacuate the area until you get some experienced help there, professional people, okay? That's back in the daylight. We worked on that all night. We just, we found some steel of sufficient strength and basically just reinforced that where the damage was. And we were able to safely boom this crane down. In conclusion, you know, as we said in the beginning, no one plans to have a crane accident. However, we should all have a plan for managing an accident if it should occur. Just to go over a few points, things to include in your plan should be know and post the emergency response numbers. That's including your distributor, your rental company, your factory folks. I would encourage you to call your crane distributor, your dealer first. They would in turn get a hold, if they needed, they would in turn get a hold of whoever appropriate at the factory level. But if you can't get the dealer and you're in an emergency, I know that the factories will come to your aid and advise you. Assign someone the responsibility for assessing the danger. Who's going to be in charge, right? We don't want everybody running around yelling and giving orders. We need someone to be in charge and assist the emergency response team. So let's pick that person in advance. Okay, the most experienced rigger crane person on the site would be appropriate. And in that event, that person is going to be in charge. Know and post the manufacturer's numbers. That should include the distributor, the manufacturer, and if it's a rental machine, you know, you would want to get a hold of your rental company. Assign someone the responsibility for talking to the news people. I can tell you that with the cell phone cameras and cell phone videos, you can't keep anything secret, even in the most secure site. Those pictures are going to get out. I was going to pick up a crane that broke. I had about an hour drive. The crane had fallen down. I was on my way over there, and I had 5 or 6 calls from associates of mine who I've worked with over the years saying, I heard you got a crane down. You know, so how did you know that? I'm not even there yet, okay? But this is the age of communication, and those pictures and those stories will go out quick. And again, that's important that when you're talking to the press or any folks of that nature, that you only give the facts that you know. Everything else is being emailed around and texted back and forth. All of that doesn't make much difference because at the end of the day, the case will be decided on the facts. Don't move anything unless you have to care for the injured, or as we said, maybe open up the road for traffic. Take pictures and measurements of everything. Don't take a picture of a hole in the ground. That doesn't help the investigators. Take pictures where we can actually see things. Interview all the witnesses. Interview them a couple of times after they've had a chance to calm down. Have the manufacturer or the distributor download the computer and effect the cleanup using sound engineering practices. Here are just a few pictures. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to go over here. This was a very nice machine. It was on one of my jobs. We had it rented. The hurricane was coming, and sure enough, the hurricane got there, and it broke this beautiful machine. This was quite a challenge to get this boom and the gantry down from, I think we're around 250-foot elevation. We had to bring in some very large cranes, one to carry people up there and the other one to handle the load. You can see a side view there from the roof of the power plant. This was quite an interesting recovery, to say the least. It took several weeks. Again, you don't want to be in a hurry. Anytime you get in a hurry, that's when you're going to make mistakes. That's when people are going to get hurt. But we literally went in the basket and we welded nuts and used pin pullers to disassemble this boom. And I don't know if you can see how the boom is racked over to one side and it's sloping down. We disconnected it here with the pin puller. We disconnected it over on the roof. In our four-way bridle, every sling had to be a different length. We went to the trouble to take a transit level, and we took shots so that we could get those slings exactly the right length so that this thing didn't roll, didn't turn. We lifted it right out of the boom connector sockets. It didn't sway, move, or swing at all because there were things down below that weren't, we couldn't damage. We couldn't just let anything fall. You can see there it went through the roof of the power plant. Interestingly enough, this roof was compromised. It's not only a big hole, several of the main support girders were damaged. They had to be supported from inside before we could even walk around here. If we'd have had a crew run up here and start running around on this roof, it could have caved in the rest of the way and we would have lost people down in the hole. So there again, you got to look at the whole picture. You've got to evaluate the dangers and the risk and the hazards involved. In this case, as I mentioned, there had to be internal reinforcing in the power plant roof before we could even go up there and touch the crane boom. Another, here's where we disconnected with the pin puller, and we also cross-chained this with come-alongs both sides. We got all four of the pins out. We started slacking the chain falls one at a time. We saw which way it wanted to move. We released that energy on our terms. We didn't just let it go its own way. Actually, it took weeks, but we were able to do it without any additional injuries or any additional damage to the equipment or the power plant. This was an unusual situation where the operator went to lunch, left the engine running, and accidentally hit the boom down lever with his knee as he exited the crane, engaging the boom down. They were across the street at the Whataburger and noticed the boom fell. It had boomed down against this column and it couldn't support its own weight once the pennant lines were slack, and it buckled right here at this pin connector. Again, we used two cranes because we weren't sure if this would break, so we hooked one crane down here, we hooked one crane up here, I'm sorry, more in this area. By calculation, we figured about where the CG was, So we were able to unpin this with a pin puller, lift it over, and lay it down out of the way. And then without even re-rigging, we were able to remove the boom foot pin with a pin puller and set that over out of the way. And it was costly, but it was recovered. This is not the way to inspect the undercarriage. I think it's what they have the little creepers for. We can roll under there. That was supposed to be a joke, haha. But anyway, I'm not a very good comedian. I'll keep my day job. This situation was one where the computer told the story. This was operator error. The operator lifted that sea container. They were all in line with this one. So he lifted that container over the right front corner of the outrigger, where he has maximum stability, okay? But he was out of the chart, severely overloaded. When the operator swung the container over the front of the crane, of course, that tipping fulcrum shortened. Now he lost his stability and the crane went over. We were able to determine that by downloading the computer and taking measurements here. That concludes my presentation. Again, thank you very much, and I'll open the floor to questions.
Okay, Zach, am I on active?
Yep, we can hear you. And Joe, I've muted you for a second because I think we're getting some echo when Mike speaks. So go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I just wanted to see if we had any questions. I have a couple of pieces of information here for folks, but first of all, I wanted to see if Joe had, if there were questions for Joe that we could respond to right away. And then I'd like to share a piece of information about a new accident investigation site. So let's see what we have for questions, if any have been typed in, Zach, during the delivery.
Yeah, and before we do that, Joe and I spoke about we have 2 or 3 more poll questions for the audience based on what they saw and from their experience. And then I do have 2 or 3 questions that came in. So everybody, I'm going to release this next question. So you'll see it up there on the screen. And go ahead and type in any questions that you have as well while you're answering this or after you've answered. But the question is, in non-fatal or non-injury accidents, in your experience, which items have been very difficult to manage? So after Joe's presentation, what have you found to be the most difficult to manage if you had experienced an accident? So go ahead, and looks like we're getting quite a few votes coming in now. I'll leave it open for another 20 seconds or so. Joe, while I do that, I'd like to ask you one of the questions that came in. It says, please discuss some tips on how to evaluate or secure the stability of collapsed cranes. How do you prevent further shifting of unstable collapsed structures, and how to do demolition or restoration work regarding getting a crane back to a stable position for recovery and investigation? So I'm going to unmute you if you want to chat on that.
Unmuted.
Okay, well that's a very good question, but unfortunately there's not a short answer to that because every situation is so very different. Some things would be very obvious where lashing, chain falls, things could be used to secure something that is dangling or looks like it could tip one way or the other. But at the end of the day, I would encourage you to consult a registered professional engineer that is familiar, works with rigging and cranes to assist you in coming up with a design for securing the machine or the boom.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joe, for that. And I just released results as well. So it looks like most people found the investigation and crane removal the most difficult, as well as then managing the customer relationship. Joe, I have a question for you based on this topic. I remember in the presentation there wasn't a ton of discussion on the customer relationship, but could you touch on, I know you usually come in as a third party because you've never been involved, you've never have been responsible for a crane accident, but what basically when faults when there's someone at fault, right? So what usually happens to the customer-vendor relationship, or are customers typically understanding, or what's the typical fallout from an accident like that? I guess it might be a really dumb question, but I'm going to ask it.
Unmuted.
Oh, it's not a dumb question at all, and although I didn't cover that in the presentation, that is certainly a valid point. If you can imagine, the first thing that happens with your contractor-client relationship is there's now a trust issue. They trusted you to bring your cranes in there and perform safe work. Now we've got a crane laying out across their facility or their property, possibly damaged, like in the power plant picture. That client was irate. They were distrustful, and it was my job, along with removing and rebuilding the crane so we could finish the project, it was my job to assure them that we could safely take all that down. We were going to fix their roof of their plant, and it was all going to be back to normal, despite the schedule delays, which was the biggest deal. So the first thing I would say is that they're going to be distrustful. You've earned their confidence when they awarded the job, and now that confidence is pretty much dissolved. So that would be the biggest obstacle, is to bring in your most professional people, or even enlist a third party to demonstrate your willingness to do the most professional thing possible, as well as follow up with a prevention plan to assure them that, you know what, we're sorry this occurred, but these are the firm steps that will be taken to prevent future occurrences.
Excellent. Good. Great answer. You made me feel better about asking a dumb question. Go ahead, Mike.
And I've got some notes based on Joe's response. If you put my screen up real quick, you can kind of it gives a boiled down reply for what Joe just highlighted. So if you switch to my screen, then we can go to the
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. I'm going to close. I'll let everyone know I'm going to close this poll. If you didn't see this question, because it'll go back to your screen once this question's gone, guys. But we have one more after this. But if you haven't answered, in your organization's experience, which elements have led to the most crane accidents? And we have about 60% of everyone voted. So if you didn't vote, go ahead and get it in there. But it's regarding structural and mechanical failure, foundation issues, crane overload, or other. Getting a few more votes in now. And Mike, I have one more poll. So do you want me to do that first, or go to your screen?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead. Okay.
So I'm going to close this poll and share it. And while I do this, Joe, I'll feed you another question, buddy. Matt Dyna from Fluor, he's a rigging engineer, I believe, either out of Georgia or California, but he asked, how much support should you expect from the crane manufacturer and insurance carrier during the accident investigation process?
Well, unfortunately, the insurance carrier is not going to, in my experience, it is not going to be a lot of help. But going through your local distributor and then conveying that on up to the manufacturer is a very acceptable process with great response. Over my career, I've had wonderful assistance, creative thinking. A lot of times I just wasn't sure what to do. I would make my suggestion to the factory or the distributor folks, those technicians and professionals. Again, they have engineers as well, and it's more of a team combination of folks with their ideas. But to answer the question, I've had wonderful assistance and response from crane manufacturers in all makes and models. I've had very little assistance from the insurance carrier. They're there, I think, pretty much for a different reason.
That makes sense. Thanks for summing that up. And everybody, I have there's a last poll question up. In your experience, which crane types have been a part of the most accidents? And I think this is a single select. So this might be a little skewed, obviously, because there's probably a lot more mobile cranes on the earth than anything else. But certainly it'll also be skewed based on what industries you work in. But I'll leave that open for another 3 minutes or 3 seconds here. And I'm going to switch to Mike's screen after that. And we had a question come in, Joe, regarding how important is reviewing maintenance service records and operating manuals. And I assume that is a question regarding the investigation process, if you want to touch on that.
Unmuted.
I have found in my career numerous cases where a crane accident resulted from a lack of maintenance. Certain components of the crane failed because they were not maintained per the manufacturer's recommendation. And I would say that you cannot do a thorough accident investigation without reviewing the manufacturer's instruction manuals, preventive maintenance manuals, and the like. All the information that comes with that machine needs to be reviewed, as far as, crane configuration, what was the pennant line length supposed to be, what was the cable length, what was the block weight. That it's not possible to do a thorough investigation without reviewing all of that literature.
Okay, terrific. Here's a couple more questions, and I'm sorry, everybody, I do have to mute Joe every time that I speak, but that's technology for you. But John asked, would it be a good idea to stand a job down briefly to explain what happened and assure other craftsmen are relaxed and have their mind on the task they are assigned? I have seen craft people still trembling 2 hours after witnessing a bad accident.
Unmuted.
This is becoming more and more the norm. I highly recommend it, especially initially when it occurs, so everyone can be briefed. Don't go over there, stay out of the barricade, everybody's fine. We got the people to the doctor. Number one, calm them down. That's one stand down. And then what I'm seeing in the refining business and the chemical plants is, once everything is stabilized and the wreckage is removed and all the folks, we know how they're doing, we have another stand down to go over what happened and preventative measures and obviously to help everyone feel better, but also to give them an idea of what not to do, the prevention measures. I highly recommend that job stand down procedure or practice. It's extremely effective.
Okay, and what I'd like to share, thanks for the questions to everyone, and I'd like to help wrap this up a little bit. We do have a new activity that'll be offered in September in Woodland, Washington. It's an accident investigation training site along at our training center here out in the yard. We'll have a mobile crane and then forklift and a rigging. We'll have all three different scenarios set up out in our yard as a result of some poor series of decisions that have been made. We're actually we have a crane that will be overturned in the yard, a full mobile crane overturned, forklift overturned, and also a rigging accident. So there'll be three separate site points for the group that's assembled. It'll be a 2-day course and offered in September, and it will review, of course, the causation tied to root cause analysis, under evaluating witness accounts, determine the violations, and then the corrective action. And if we can, we're going to see if we can get Joe to come join us and may end up with a strong discussion and workshop point on the recovery for those incidents as they sit. So this is a new offering by ITI. It's very tightly tied to the presentation today and some of the things that we do as a service company on evaluation and analysis of accidents, just much like Joe. So this is a new offering that will be probably targeted not only to crane operators, riggers, but especially safety personnel and management folks that need to deal with accidents and incidents as they arise, some injury, some fatality, and some non, but it's about equipment damage, property damage, and other issues that arise from that. So we'll have a broadcast announcement about that program. I do believe September of 2013, in just about 3 months or 4 months, we'll end up with a large announcement about that and invitations for those who would like to attend. It'll be the maiden voyage and pilot program for this 2-day course, and we'll have damaged equipment. I mean, a full crane turned over in the yard. We'll have issues related to that lead up to the accidents. We'll ask the participants to work in teams to resolve causation, violations, and corrective action. So it should be a pretty exciting week. And I'm looking, I think we're going to probably be targeting the second week of September for that program. So just as a closeout, we just wanted to make sure and offer that out to you. And you'll be, all those that are on this recording or the webinar today will be receiving invitations to get the announcement to participate and come join us for that week. We sure appreciate Joe's participation and his help today, and a marvelous program, and it's a great way to get to the heart of the matter for what to do, when to do it, and who should be involved. In the new P30 document, we have emergency response is a major list on a critical lift plan, much to what Joe's addressed today. Who to talk to, what plans should be in place, how to involve different personnel on site, and get outside responders to help, and so on. So we hope that's never used, but it needs to be in the plan. What do we do in case? And I think Joe's brought that to the surface today very well, and we really appreciate his contributions today, not only to this webinar, but certainly to our whole industry in the last 40 years. I do believe we're operating better and safer today than we were 40 years ago, and it's people like Joe that have brought us to that point. So, Zach, I'm going to let you close this out. If you're still on here, I'd like to thank Joe and Becht Engineering for letting us borrow him for today's presentation. And we certainly, it's just a premier professional delivery and a very important subject that can help save folks downstream. The comment that I heard Joe say a couple of years ago was, quite often more people are hurt in the crane recovery process than are hurt during the crane accident itself, and that's why this is such an important discussion point, is to make sure we don't get injured after the accident is all over, because of the compression and tension and all the structures that are trying to go different directions unexpectedly, and that's why it's so important to have really quality of folks involved in helping assist in getting the wreckage contained and then managed down to inert position. I think his stored energy comment is really the key to trigger that helps us keep our hands, fingers, and toes, and keep our bodies upright. So, Joe, thanks so much for your participation. Zach, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. And Joe, I want to say thank you as well on behalf of ITI. I do have one more question for you. So it came in right before I gave the bell. And one thing I'll mention to everybody still in attendance, you can access the recording, which will be up probably in 24 hours, but also this management file that Joe has graciously given us access to for your records at iti.com/showcase. So you make sure you just go there and get all the files like I mentioned before. Joe, this question came in regarding safety folks. how many safety executives have you seen charged with criminal charges or seen jail time due to negligence or something like that?
Historically, no one had charges pressed against them. We're talking about, 20, 25 years ago and further back. What we're seeing today, I'm not aware of very many. I know that the responsibility is being distributed across the board. The controlling entity now has responsibility for cranes on their site, even if they hired someone, contracted them to bring cranes in. The crane owner has responsibility, as we saw with our friend Mr. Loma up in New York, who had manslaughter charges brought up against him. By the way, he was found innocent of those accusations. But the fact is, they did go after him. They wanted to put him in prison, but he was able to prove that wasn't anything that he did. I just think that going further and further into the future, as the new crane rule takes a firm hold in industry, we're going to see more and more people not only be subject to litigation and lawsuits, civil suits, if you will, but we're going to see some people go to jail.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure Mike can comment on that. A lot of different investigations he's done, but thank you again, Joe, so much. I really appreciate it. There was, I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of emails that I'll probably forward to you from attendees and thanks and whatnot, but making the industry better, and we just appreciate you spreading the knowledge. So on the screen here, everybody, again, it's just you click webinars, you'll be able to access Joe's presentation when you click view past webinars right here, or I'm sorry, you guys aren't even looking at my screen. Anyways, you can go to iti.com/webinars and you'll find out how to do that. So Joe, I want to give you the last word, buddy. I'll unmute you here. So again, I really appreciate it, and we appreciate it.
Unmuted.
Well, again, thank you all very, very much for your time, and I hope that you're able to take something away from this that may be useful going forward. I would just encourage everyone to work safe and work smart.
Terrific. Thanks, Joe, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great Thursday, Friday, and weekend. And again, check out the webinars and the workshops and Becht Engineering, Becht.com, as well as the accident investigation course. We'll send an email out to you all for information on that in the next month or so, when it's going to be and whatnot. So have a great weekend. Thank you.